Hello, welcome to Hitting Home. We have as our guest today Nik Nanos of Nanos Research, Canada's most eminent polling firm, talking to people across the country, getting a feel for the economic background of the country, both the private sector and public sector information. Nik is the go-to guy. Welcome to the show, Nik.
Great to join you.
Nik,
Excellent.
I'm just going to jump in and say one thing real quick. I have been waiting for this moment for years. I feel like a fanboy groupie at a Taylor Swift concert equivalent.
No,
And I just wanted to say welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you.
the good news is
Thank you.
I think I'm normal. How's that? Let's have a
Normal.
Normal and entertaining. How's that?
Normal and
There you
entertaining.
go.
Well, that you are, and I've seen you speak at a number of Korea and AREA events, and you do have that way of taking Excel spreadsheets and turning them into sheet music somehow. So we're pleased to have you here to talk in. And one of the things we do want to talk about today is a poll that was conducted on behalf of AREA post-pandemic, but earlier this year. And I was surprised by some of the results and some of the findings that came out of that. And I'm just going to hand it over to you, and maybe you can hit on some of the highlights of what came out of that poll.
Well, some of the key things, think of it this way. Everybody's trying to figure out what's happening and what will happen when it comes to the market.
Yes.
Some of the key standout things for me include the fact that people still think that residential real estate is a good investment. So it hasn't put a wet blanket, but people are a little more cautious. Second of all, the importance and centrality of a realtor in navigating in this COVID environment is critical, because people are more open to kind of virtual tours. That also means that they're going to be reliant more on their realtor to help vet things, to make sure that when they go visit a place that it's safe and kind of meets the standards and regulations. And the other forward-looking thing, and I thought this was quite fascinating, had to do with the burbs and the country. That
Yes.
there are a lot more people that are thinking, downtown living is good, but I'm looking at the suburbs, and I'm looking at living in kind of rural Ontario, rural Canada. And if I'm working from home, it might change not just where I live, but the type of place that I might want to buy.
Yes.
So there's positive news on the attitude. There are changes in consumer behavior, and also changes in the role of a realtor within all of that mix.
So, Nik, I want to ask you, though, you talk about changes in consumer behavior, and I think that that's a great descriptive. I think we would successfully argue, though, that millennials and the acknowledgement of who that group is and that demographic is certainly were game changers in behavior, in shedding car insurance, enjoying public transit, and looking at the pod of a condominium lifestyle as a place to lay my head, but then taking in the surroundings of the neighborhood as sort of the rest of the household or the rest of the lifestyle. Now we have COVID as another game changer. Thoughts on how this will impact those who...
And I'm probably going to offend some millennials by saying this, but it's kind of like retro hour for millennials. They're going to turn into their parents, right?
Oh.
A home with a backyard, living space in the home, right? The home as the bubble, right? And that's a complete game changer, especially if an increasing number of millennials, especially those in the white collar workforce, end up teleworking, working from home. That means that the home has to be a place where they not only live, but where they work, where they exercise, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's why we're seeing an increased appetite in the suburbs for larger homes, for homes with more amenities in them, with a backyard, kind of outdoor space, and almost like a retreat from the I need the small condo in a high density urban setting, a retreat from that to something more that their parents were kind of looking at.
If you're a developer, what are they thinking right now?
The developer has to actually think about the configuration and design of housing. And I think that's going to be one of the key takeaways here. So we should not be just thinking about bedrooms. We should be thinking about rooms as multi-purpose areas that could be a bedroom and a guest room, but also an office. We might want to be thinking about houses that have guest offices, you know, like when their siblings come to visit with their family, their brother or sister might need to do some work, and you might be thinking about having a guest office. So I think developers have to kind of fine tune and hone that concept of a home as not just a living space, but as a working space for the people that are there, but also for potentially visitors.
Yeah. And that's a flexibility we have with a detached house with a bit more square footage over, say, a GTA condo. And what you're talking about has been reflected in our numbers within the industry as well. We're seeing a bit of a slowing down within the GTA of those condo sales. Yet in the burbs, the outlying regions, including Barrie, we're seeing an increasing influx of GTA area buyers, who both first-time buyers who are, as Sean Morrison, when we had him on him, and I love the quote, he says, "You drive till you qualify." And we're seeing a lot of that, but we're also seeing a lot of existing owners within the GTA who either live in a big old house, they're empty nesters, they're coming north or heading out to cheaper areas to buy. And we're also seeing some of those condo owners who have bought in the last 10, 15 years, who after 3 months sitting at home with COVID are saying, okay, we need to get out and put some more quality into our living if we're going to be at home for a lot of that.
Yeah, but Mike, to your point, you know, when you talk about condo owners downtown, there could be the new sweet spot will be condos that are within walking distance of work.
Yes.
You know, what's going to get crushed here is public transit. Public transit is going to be crushed because, you know, millennials and people in general are more concerned about taking public transit, which means they're either going to go for no public transit, right, where they aren't even remotely close because they're teleworking, or picking a condo that is kind of like 2 blocks from where they might need to show up for work a couple of days a week. So I don't think the condo market is kind of, I haven't written that off. I think it's just going to change in terms of where the demand is going to be, that it's the condos are going to be even closer to work so that people don't have to take public transit.
So Nick, can I give you 30 seconds to tell me what your thoughts are on the GO Transit's expansion of the electrified rail system to Barrie and areas like Milton, et cetera? What's going to happen to GO Transit?
Oh man, you know what? Well, first of all, it's got to happen because it's good for the economy. It's good for Barrie and for the areas, and we need to build up Toronto. But it has to be done in a way that respects the new pandemic reality, because this isn't just the first wave. There will be more waves coming after this.
Excellent. Thank you. With that, we got to go to break real quick, but stay with us. You're watching Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. We've got Nik Nanos from Nanos Research. And Nick, thank you. We've been talking about your findings, your recent findings, a poll that you did for the Ontario Real Estate Association. I want to skew the conversation a little bit towards the broker world or the finance side of things. And some recent numbers that I saw, for example, in a Bloomberg News article from the 11th of September is talking about just a decrease in the debt ratio and household debt ratio. And I was concerned by it because it refers to 11% increase in disposable income. And then sort of down near the bottom of the article, it talks about, well, where's this money coming from? In my opinion, mortgage deferrals, record low mortgage interest rates, that kind of thing. And that made me shiver and shudder to think about sort of the bad combination that seems to me. What are your thoughts on household debt and income right now?
Well, the thing is that the structure of where we are in the economy is fundamentally at risk. And, we haven't even started to hit the bad news because everything has been masked over by the stimulus, CERB, and all that kind of stuff. As soon as that spigot is turned off, because it is not sustainable for a prolonged period of time, that's when we're actually going to understand the true impact on the economy, the number of small businesses that might be at risk, right? The number of people that that don't get reemployed, and I think right now, if we think things are not great now, this is with pumping $340 billion into the economy, and people are still feeling a little anxious. You imagine what it's going to be like if the government decides to scale back how much is pumped into the economy. So, Arif, to your point, it's going to be much worse than what we have now. And the question is, when will that happen? When will the government change its spending? Those are the key signals to watch out for.
So let's push that a little bit further, though, because just this weekend as well, I believe it was revealed that the number one discussed item at the Liberal caucus is bringing in the universal basic income. I know you're an apolitical. I think you're an apolitical organization, and I do appreciate that. But let's talk about the topic. What does that do, and how sustainable is that?
Well, the thing is, this is a way for the Liberals to continue the stimulus. It's just CERB with another name that has become that could become permanent. But the thing is that we recently completed a survey for Bloomberg News on the deficit. About 40% of Canadians want the deficit to continue to be large and to continue to pump money into the economy. About 29%, I believe, want to go back to the pre-pandemic levels, and about 14 or 15% of thereabouts want a balanced budget. So why don't we just say that for average Canadians, they're receiving these things. So this is a different kind of deficit. In the past, when government spending went up and no one saw any of the money, it's kind of like, where is it all going? It's like a big black hole. But now when people see that they're receiving stimulus, there tends to be a little more acceptance. The problem is, and I'll just say this from a numbers perspective, how do you conceive the difference between a $30 billion deficit and a $300 billion deficit? It's almost inconceivable. You just know that it's big. You don't know how bad that it might be, right?
Until we have to start paying it back.
Yeah, well, exactly.
But it's not in my lifetime, right?
Yeah,
and
no,
that's the thing.
Exactly. I'd always kind of say that this is like being in a swimming pool, right? If you're in a swimming pool and you're 3 feet underwater or 300 feet underwater, the fact of the matter is you're still drowning, right? You're still, like, if you're in business, you're still underwater. You're not being able to kind of move forward. Yeah. So I think that's the big question. But can I tell you something? Politicians, and we are apolitical, we don't do work for any political party. Politicians, many are afraid to talk about this because it means that people are going to have to adapt and change. People are going to have to change their jobs. Businesses are going to have to restructure, and it's not going to be pretty.
What's not going to be pretty is a politician not getting reelected, and that's why they are afraid to say it. And that's just my personal opinion. They don't want to talk about something.
100%. And you know what? The problem with many politicians, and I don't think this is ideological, is they can always agree on spending money, right? But when it comes to cutting, that's when you get into disagreement.
That's tough.
Now, I know
government, and it's tough in the household too. And
I know we're not south of the border. I know we're not south of the border, but we do have a close neighbor who's south of the border, and they're already making predictions about defaults and delinquencies coming towards the end of 2020 and into 2021. And obviously, they are in an election cycle right now. The overflow, the spillover into Canadian thinking, we get a lot of our news and press and headlines out of the South. Are we looking at them as sort of a sort of the foreshadowing?
Oh, well, it's definitely foreshadowing from an economic perspective. Let's face it, our economies are intertwined. You know, the US coughs and we get a cold. The Canadian economy is robust when it works well with the United States. When the US economy is hot, it's good for Canada. When it's not, it's bad news. So, you know, and for the only difference in this whole thing has to do with the public health perspective, where Canadians believe generally that we're doing a better job than the United States at managing the pandemic, that there seems to be a little more orderliness to what we're doing, more cooperation between the federal government and provinces, and also cooperation between provinces like Ontario and Quebec and Atlantic Canada and BC. And they see what's going on in the United States, and they probably think, you know, from a pandemic response perspective, we're doing better as a country. But when they see the economic disruption that's going to happen there, that's all Canadians think about is what will that mean for us, because our economies are intertwined.
Yes, and we've seen within Ontario, and I guess across Canada, but I'll just stay specific to Ontario and our region, Barrie, and that is the appetite for home purchasing. It's still relatively healthy. Now, with what we've talked about here, that appetite may change because the ability is going to change going forward. And that ties in with a problem we've seen for some time, and that is affordability and increasing house prices in the GTA, the imbalance of supply and demand that we have here in Ontario. Now, Ontario Real Estate Association, as well as Korea, we've lobbied the provincial and federal government to try and correct that imbalance. I wonder if you have any advice just for Ontario residents or Canadian residents on what they can and should be doing to interact with their government to help to correct that imbalance of supply and demand.
Nick, I'm going to give you 45 seconds to give us a teaser. We're going to go into the break, and then you can come back and give us a robust answer.
You know, the first thing that people should say, first of all, most Canadians and Ontarians want to own a home, period, full stop. Second of all, someone's home is usually their biggest single investment. They should be telling politicians, don't mess this up with new taxes, new levies, new anything on. If you do anything creates an obstacle to home ownership, that's not good for me, not good for my kids.
Yeah. Excellent. And with that, we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. And Nick, you took us a real quick segue or teaser. Canadians want to own a home, and if the politicians mess it up with taxes, that's bad for me, and that's bad for a politician in that regard. Let's talk about Barrie as, are we an anomaly in the sense of we've got this proximity to the GTA, we're right at the 400, other areas lying around the GTA are quite built up. And we've gone from an average home price of about $450,000, which was already testing the affordability for many people in the area. And now, even if we get 1% of the migration or that exodus that we're talking about out of the GTA coming into Barrie, and we've got limited supply, we're just barely into a secondary plan phase 1. And what's going to happen to house prices? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is, the fact of the matter is that Barrie is kind of in a bit of a sweet spot in the market because of all the changes that have taken place. Think of the old model as, and for many municipalities, high density urban is now fundamentally contrary to public health guidelines, right? So the question and you also think of Barrie's kind of strategic location where, it's kind of within driving distance of beautiful nature where people can, even in a pandemic, go out and kind of enjoy themselves. So the question is, what is Barrie doing to increase the supply of homes, right? The types of homes that people want. And I would be very concerned when I see the average price of a home jump like that. What it shows is that there's a problem. There's a problem at the municipal level, and there's also a problem at the provincial level. So for the municipality at Barrie, what they have to do is look at this and to say, what type of housing is Barrie going to need in the future that aligns with a pandemic type world? And then what are we creating the bylaws, zoning, incentives in order to make sure that we have the housing that the future residents of Barrie are going to need?
Let me just touch on that for a second, Nick, if I might. I spent 2 terms on council in Barrie, and I can tell you there was a massive groundswell and push and essentially browbeating if you spoke against high density development.
Yeah, no more.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, like literally, I've been out for 2 years, and you're talking about this massive shift, and it's health. I mean, you coined it beautifully that all public policy or all planning policy right now goes against public health guidelines. So what is a municipality who's invested millions in the development community, we're talking billions of dollars, into meeting the guidelines or the objectives of a municipal council that has said, and the provincial guidelines that have said, we're going towards high density? What now?
The best communities and the best city councilors are the ones that are going to throw that stuff out the door and say, that was true before the pandemic, but it's not true now because people need to be safe from a healthy perspective. More people are going to be teleworking, and that we have to, the municipalities and the communities that are really going to thrive are the first ones that recognize the new reality and then look around at all the zoning bylaws, everything that they're doing, and saying, hey, how can we adjust this so that the market can create the supply, the new supply that people are going to need and want? And how are we going to position Barrie? So I'd say, I don't think we have to say that what was done in the past was wrong. I think what we have to recognize is that was the past. It's not relevant.
Are you seeing that coming from municipal governments around the province and from the province and federally, that they're adapting that change that we need to?
I'm not seeing it anywhere, because right now they're worried about just trying to balance the books. They're worried about
putting out the fire.
Public health. Which means that there's got to be someone at the municipal table to say, okay, yes, we've got our public health priorities, but now we have to start about how do our communities become pandemic proof, including how we live. And it might not be as sexy as making sure we get the vaccination and the schools are working, but the work has to be done now, because this isn't something you flip on and off, right?
No.
So let me summarize this a little bit, if I might. We basically said that was then, this is now. Not that it was wrong, it's just not right now. I've also heard you suggest that we're not done in one wave or two, that there may be multiple waves. So this isn't a short-term blip. This is got some longevity to it. But we're also going away from, financially or fiscally, we're going away from an ideology that said, picking a farmer's field in the middle of nowhere, half an hour from somewhere to somewhere else, that was financially unsustainable because nobody was being taxed and paying for the infrastructure renewal in between somewhere and somewhere else, with a half hour of nowhere in between. That was also unsustainable, unaffordable. But we're now saying we've got to, once again, spread out. We're not able to enjoy. Everybody says the GTA or Toronto's got lower taxes. and that's because of density. And we've got higher taxes comparably in Barrie, and that's irrelevant at this point. I guess what you're saying.
To your point, Arif, we might be moving to a new model where Barrie says Barrie is going to be a series of smaller community neighborhoods that includes commercial, right? That the concept of the 100% suburban kind of development is also part of the past. That everything's going to need to be walkable, right?
Yeah.
And I think for developers, when they're kind of putting these new plans on the table, they need to have a complete plan that says, you know what, someone's going to need to want to walk to the grocery store. They're going to want to live in their house, maybe telework. And that Barrie, the downtown Barrie might be something different in 20 years. Barrie might be a series of very thriving, vibrant sub-communities under the Barrie umbrella that have their own unique identity. And
Mike, we've got just over a minute. Tie it up.
I'm just saying, and interestingly, the complexity of that will be some of that outlying area between here and Toronto is some of the richest and densest farming lands in the country, if not in the world. So finding that balance there'll be some battles fought, I'm sure.
Yeah. Final thoughts, Nik. You've got a new study that you'll be releasing in the near future for the Ontario Real Estate Association. Do you want to give us a teaser? Could we be the ones who break the story here on Hitting Home?
No, I can't give you a teaser, but I would like to say the positive news is that positive perceptions about the market still persist. People are increasingly looking on the virtual front. So realtors take note of that in terms of the virtual dimension, and realtors are still at the central core of this whole experience.
Yeah, Nik, I might still be your biggest fan ever. I saw you at AMO a couple of times, and now here, who would have thought on our show, Hitting Home with Mike Arif. Mike, send us off.
Well, thank you, Nik. We do appreciate, and we can hope we can have you back as a future guest. I'm quite interested to see what some of these future polls post-pandemic are going to reveal about us all, and we will stay tuned. Thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. It was fun.
Thank you, Nik.